Talk a little bit about the people who reject evolution as a model for biological progress. What do you think they have a problem with? Clearly, they have a problem with something.
Absolutely. And I think this is where the scientists make a mistake responding to them. Um, I think that what the anti-evolution crowd, let's call them that, what they're really worried about is morality. They're worried about ethics and structure. They're worried that if you believe in evolution, you can't be moral, your children will be corrupted, society will fall apart. So I don't think they're actually interested in the process of developing and selection. They're just worried about the consequences of that process from an ethical point of view. And also they're concerned that if evolution has the incredible explanatory power that it seems to be and it doesn't involve a god, then there's not as much reason to believe in a god. And I think that threatens them also. So I think it's, one side is saying, here's the evidence, here's the evidence, here's the evidence, how can you not see this? And the other side is saying, oh, that's scary, oh, that's terrifying, that would be really bad if what I think you're saying were true. So it's this emotional reaction against the appeal for evidence.
I see. So they're not really engaging with the substance of the theory.
I don't think so. I think most of the anti-evolution people do not know what evolution is. I had so I was a counselor at the McCall Outdoor Science School down in McCall. They had a bunch of fifth graders come in and we spent a week with them and mentored them and showed them experiments and stuff. Great fun. And I was reading Fukuyama's textbook on evolution. And I got to talking to one of the kids, and it's great talking to kids about this stuff because they won't beat around the bush. They'll tell you what they think. And he said he didn't believe in evolution because evolution was the theory that living things just started popping out of green goo. So you got green goo and then out comes a rabbit. And I think some adults actually believe that sort of thing.
I think there are a lot of mysterious reasons. I think people look at the human body, for instance, and all the marvelous things that it does, and they think, okay, so, you evolved this kind of eye. How? One day you didn't have an eye and then you did?
That's what many people think.
It just seems, too miraculous to be true. So, kind of have a good point there.
And I take it exactly the other way around. Yes, it's miraculous. Yes, it's exciting. It's wonderful what nature has produced. Evolution is a marvelous design mechanism. You just don't need an intelligent designer behind it.
And it took a long time. I think people don't realize how long it took to have, a neuron that detected light and then two neurons or whatever that detected
That's
light.
true.
So, it just took a long time.
And actually, eyes are an interesting example because we understand very well how eyes evolved. And they've evolved independently, I think it's 35, 37 times. So there's completely different ways that the eyes have evolved. And if you think about it, it would make perfect sense. What's the biggest opportunity for harvesting energy that anything on Earth can have? It's using the sun. It's photons bombarding the Earth. So you would expect many times some sort of mechanism for detecting photons and doing something with them would come about. And you've got not just eyes that do that, you've got chlorophyll in plants, which actually came from bacteria in the ocean, and on and on. So it's really not at all surprising that you'd have these incredibly complex mechanisms for harvesting and making use of photons. It's the main source of energy on Earth.
And yet we're not capable of seeing every kind of electromagnetic radiation, so there's some sort of selection for the visual spectrum there for whatever reasons.
Yes, and that's an example of evolution not finding the optima. It works on what you've already had.
Can you run an algorithm that'll simulate, given certain circumstances, how an eye would have evolved in a more optimal way?
Actually, it's been done a few times. So you've got to define what optimality is here. And if you're a flatworm,
right.
Also evolution doesn't look for
Value judgment.
optimality, right? Evolution looks for something that's better than what you got, right? So a flatworm that detects light and dark and then suddenly can detect light, dark, and gray has an advantage.
Maybe.
Maybe. Yeah. But you asked about designing an eye. There it's hard to say what a better eye would be, but you can certainly evolve like an artificial retina to capture the light and do something with it. A more interesting example is a few years ago, some friends of mine evolved an antenna. There was a competition at NASA for an antenna that would go into a satellite, and the criteria were it has to be as small and light as possible, it has to be able to pick up signals from just about any angle, it has to have very high fidelity. And the engineers came out and they designed like some fractal antennas and some really complicated swirly things. And the evolutionary algorithm came out with an antenna that looked sort of like a bent paperclip. Went up, out, over, and then back up like this. So it was a three-dimensional configuration that no one had ever thought of before. And it was actually the lightest, the best antenna for the job. So if you can define what best is, you can usually drive an evolutionary process toward it. But biological evolution is not driving toward any optima. It's not the way biology works. And you start from random configurations when you're doing evolutionary engineering. So imagine you start with 1,000 different chunks of metal of various shapes. And then you find the two which are the lightest and pick up the most signals and best satisfy your criteria. And then you recombine features of those. And then you have a new population of 1,000 antennas which are slightly modified from the old ones. So you start off with random shapes, and some of them may be slightly better than others. They're all crap, though. And over time, you end up with these amazing designs.
So why can't we... I kind of have a social question. Would it be possible to, for instance, in socio-political economy, to say, we always have trouble apparently designing a good government. Would it be possible to create an algorithm that would kind of begin with a resource base and then at least simulate maybe not what's best, but what's most balanced?
What's better?
For the managing of resources of large populations of people?
I'm not sure I would want to design a political system with evolution. With evolution coming from me, I think we already have evolution of political systems. And I think we've learned a lot over the last 7,000 years of human history. It's a really interesting question.
We seem to be repeating our models.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that. There's some things that the early Babylonian records were accounting books. So it is interesting. Of course, 7,000 years isn't very much time.
No. But for thinking people, we still have the poor and the rich, and we're still trying to figure out what to do and how to minimize suffering.
Exactly. And I actually think, we're making social statements here, I think that participatory democracy is one of the best systems that's ever been developed for minimizing suffering. And we forget how recent that is. And that was a major innovation in human history just 300 years ago, right? Because I also think, getting back to evolution doesn't require that what you're doing now aims towards something better. What evolution requires is that if you end up doing something worse, you'll have a disadvantage relative to someone else who did something better, right? So it's a retrospective rather than a prospective process.